Helpful for life.
Now it's time to talk about something that we all know and love. Protein! Okay, here's a general tip for cooking most proteins. As proteins cook, they start to set and maybe even develop a little bit of a crust. So if you go to flip something or move the protein and you notice that it's sticking, well, give it a little more time, because once it's closer to done, it will release itself from the pan and make it much easier to flip or move. When it comes to proteins, there are recommended temperatures to cook them to. These exist so that all the germs are killed. One other reason that these recommended temperatures exist is based on personal preference. For example, some people may like their steak rare, some people may like it medium rare. But it can be hard to determine the correct temperature of the protein to make sure that it doesn't overcook, which can make it dry and give it a bad texture. So how do you do that? Well, the first step is to use a probe thermometer. And don't skimp on this one either. You want one that reads accurately and you want one that reads quickly. Probe the protein at the thickest part and see what the lowest temperature it reads is. Also, you will want to remove the protein 2 to 5 degrees before it's done, because that temperature may continue to rise after it cooks. The thicker the meat, especially for roasts and things like that, it will raise the temperature a little more after it cooks. The more often you cook the same cut of protein, you'll be able to see the signs by look and feel a little better, but you should always still use the thermometer. It is hands down the best and most repeatable and most consistent way to get your protein cooked to the right temperature. But let me tell you about a couple of methods that make hitting that sweet spot that much easier. The first one is something called sous vide, which is French for under vacuum. Using this method, you put your food inside of a plastic bag, suck out all of the air, and then you cook it in a water bath that's held at a constant temperature. This is great because you can cook that steak at 135 degrees Fahrenheit and it'll hit that perfect medium rare every time. Another bonus is that since it's being cooked at its final temperature, you don't have to worry as much about it getting overdone. This means you don't have that small minute-long window to hit perfection. Now, you don't want to leave it resting at that temperature for too long because it could affect the tenderness of the meat, but this is on the order of hours instead of the order of minutes. You then finish your steak by hitting it with a torch or searing it on a hot pan to get that nice tasty crust that we all know and love. If this method of cooking tickles your fancy, make sure to check out the sous vide cooker we recommend in the Prep Your Setup milestone. If you don't want to spring for a sous vide cooker, there's another method you can use that's called a reverse sear. AmazingRibs.com likes to call it
Redneck sous vide, or as some other people like to call it, sear in the rear.
Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to cook that protein at a lower temperature until it's 10 to 15 degrees below that final temperature that you want. Then you're going to sear that protein on a screaming hot pan or using a torch to get that nice crust. Here are some pictures that show the amazing results from these magical methods. As you can see, with a traditionally cooked steak, there is a thick band that is overcooked around the edges. But with the sous vide or the reverse sear method, that band is much, much smaller. This results in a juicier, more tender steak. One other plus of these methods is you don't have to worry as much about thickness, because those thin parts and those thick parts will both hit that right temperature. All right, let's get down to the specifics.